Hello students, I am Dr. Sharad Kumar, Assistant Professor, Department of Wildlife Sciences, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. In this lecture, I shall discuss about the captive breeding and reintroduction, which are under the modern approaches of ex situ conservation of biodiversity. So let's first discuss about the captive breeding. Captive breeding is the part of ex situ conservation of threatened biodiversity values. The captive breeding is one aspect of a species conservation effort which involve breed animal of an endangered species in captivity with the goal of releasing them back into wild at some time in future. The captive breeding of endangered wildlife animal is often necessary for their long-term conservation. Environmental enrichment strategies are used to improve both physiological and psychological welfare of captive animals, which can be achieved by increasing the expression of natural behavior and decreasing abnormal behaviors. Captive breeding is an integral part of the overall conservation action plan for a species that help to prevent extinction of species, subspecies, or population. It is an intensive management practices for threatened individuals, populations, and species by anthropogenic and natural factors. Small and fragmented populations are affected by the various threats, and these populations need to be preserved by keeping some of the individuals of such population in the captive breeding facilities. Captive population can be maintained while threats in the wild are reduced or removed through conservation programs. After removal of threats, individuals from the captive facilities will be released back into the natural habitats. Therefore, captive breeding provides an insurance policy against catastrophe in the natural wild habitat of the species. Aims of the captive breeding. There are two main aims of captive breeding programs. The first one is to maintain stock for reintroduction or reinforcement efforts, opportunities for education, raising of awareness, and scientific research. The second aim is to provide a method of increasing reproductive output beyond what could be possible in the wild by providing ideal conditions and removing of natural predators on the target species. So by adopting these methods, we can increase the overall reproduction output of the target species and maintain the large number of the animals in the captive facilities. Challenges of captive breeding programs. However, there are several challenges that are limiting factor to the attainment of the goal of captive breeding for many species. One of the major challenge is a circular consequence of small population management that has inherent genetic and demographic problems due to genetic diversity loss and demographic stochasticity. It leads to genetic inbreeding, which reduces the long-term survival of species. Genetic inbreeding increases susceptibility of species to various diseases and appearance of deleterious genes. In addition to this, individuals that are well adapted to the circumstances in captivity may also be less well adapted to the circumstances in wild and may show lower fitness upon reintroduction in the wild habitat. This reduces their applicability in the natural conservation of the wild population of the captive bred species. Most notably, within the captive environment, housing and husbandry will also have significant impact on the birth and death rates of the species maintained in the captive bred facilities. Examples of captive breeding in India. To save the endangered species of vultures, captive breeding of vulture was started by the Indian and the Nepal governments. In India, Bombay Natural History Society, with support from the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change and Indian Central Zoo Authority, initiated the vulture breeding program in India. Under the program, Bombay Natural History Society established captive breeding centers in Penjore, Bhopal, Guwahati and Baksha and holding around 1000 vultures. Similarly, government also started captive breeding for the Great Indian Bustard. Great Indian Bustard is one of the rarest bird in world with 200 individuals left almost exclusively in India. The species is listed as critically endangered and Schedule 1 under the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Ministry has taken up an initiative on conservation breeding of the Great Indian Bustard in collaboration with Rajasthan, Gujarat and Maharashtra Forest Department and technical support from the Wildlife Institute of India, Dehradun. The objective of this program is to build up captive population of Great Indian Bustard and to release the chicks in the wild for increasing the population and also to promote in situ conservation of the species. The captive breeding facility for Great Indian Bustard was set up in the Desert National Park located in the Rajasthan. Similarly, Indian government also started the captive breeding of Gharials. In addition to this, captive breeding of Gharials was also started by the Nepali government. In 1975, the Indian Crocodile Conservation Project was set up under the auspices of the Government of India, initially in Odisha's Satkosia Gorge Sanctuary. The country's first Gharial breeding center was built in Nandankanan Zoological Park in Odisha. In 1976, two breeding centers were established in Uttar Pradesh, one in Gharial Reserve Forest in Lucknow and one in Katanya Ghat Wildlife Sanctuary. Between 1975 and 1982, 16 crocodile rehabilitation centers and 5 crocodile sanctuaries were established in the country for the conservation and captive breeding of the gharials in the India, as gharial is one of the critically endangered species of reptiles and require urgent conservation program for its long-term conservation. Guidelines for captive breeding. Guidelines for captive breeding or conservation breeding are provided by International Union for Conservation of Natural Resources and Central Zoo Authority of India. Central Zoo Authority identified about 70 endangered species in India for conservation breeding in the Indian zoos. Indian zoos should have at least 100 properly and scientifically bred individuals of each endangered species in captivity to act as an insurance cover in case of population loss of species in the wild. This is the mandate of the Central Zoo Authority. Under this, various zoos are given responsibility of coordination and breeding of the different animals which are identified for the conservation breeding of the animals in India. For example, National Zoological Park, New Delhi is responsible for the coordination of conservation breeding of Asiatic lion, Shanghai, and the Royal Bengal tiger. Arignar Anna Zoological Park is responsible for the conservation breeding of lion-tailed macaque. Assam State Zoo and Botanical Garden is responsible for the conservation breeding of the rhino and pygmy hog. Release of captive bred animals. Several cases of successful release or reintroduction or translocation to wild habitats involving captive animals are reported from the various parts of the world, such as Arabian oryx and golden lion tamarin, pygmy hog, vultures, gharials, etc. Espinal Foundation has created zoological history by releasing captive bred gorillas to the wild in Gabon, cheetahs in South Africa, black rhinos to Tanzania, and are now in the middle of endeavors to release their whole herd of 13 African elephants in Howlett's Zoo in Kent in United Kingdom to Kenya. So this foundation plays very important role in releasing the captive bred animals in their natural habitat. Pygmy hog captive breeding is successful case study from India. Pygmy hog is a critically endangered species and it is the smallest wild pig species in the world. Historically, it is found in India, Nepal, and Bhutan. But due to anthropogenic pressures and habitat destruction, its range is restricted to Assam and only around 150 individuals are left in the past. So the species is at the brink of extinction. The pygmy hog extinct from the face of the earth if conservation programs were not initiated at the right time. Indian government, in collaboration with various institutions and organizations, initiated Pygmy hog conservation program in 1995. IUCN Species Survival Commission on Pig, Peccaries and Hippos Specialist Group, Gharial Wildlife Conservation Trust, Forest Department of Assam, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change have played crucial role in the initiation of this program. The primary aim of this program is the conservation of pygmy hog and other endangered species of tall grassland of the region through field research, captive breeding, and reintroduction after restoration of degraded former habitats. 6 individuals, 2 males on 4 females captured from the Manas in 1996. A breeding center at Vasistha near Guwahati was established and animals are translocated to this facility. 5 more pygmy hogs were captured and released in the facility and they bred successfully in the facility. Population doubled in 1997 in captive breeding facility. In 6 years, population increases by 1200% and 75 individuals are now available in facility in 2002. Unanticipated and rapid increase in the captive population create a space problem in the captive facility. This forced program to restrict the breeding in captivity facility. So, a larger facility at Potasali established near Nameri National Park in Assam. The facility has 4 holding enclosures and 4 pre-release enclosure with near natural habitat of the pygmy hawk. Then scientists conducted survey to find out suitable location for release of the captive bred animal in the captivity. Sunai Rupai Wildlife Sanctuary and Nameri National Park identified as suitable sites for the release of captive bred individuals. Habitat management and protection regimes were initiated in both the identified sites before releasing the animals in the wild. In 2007, 3 social groups, 7 males and 9 females, were transferred from Batista to Potasali pre-release enclosures. During the process, scientists ensure the minimum human contact with pygmy hawk. The individuals in pre-release enclosures begin behave like the wild ones, and after this, individuals are shifted to release enclosure in Sunai Rupai after 5 months in 2008. After keeping in release enclosures for 2 weeks, the individuals are released in the wild in their natural habitat. 9 individuals are released in wild in 2009 and 10 in 2010. Over the next decades, 35 hawk, 18 male and 17 female were released in Sunai Rupai Wildlife Sanctuary, 59 in Orang National Park, and 22 in Barnardi Wildlife Sanctuary in Assam. Between 2008 and 16, 100 captive bred pygmy hawks have been successfully reintroduced into the wild at 3 different locations in Assam. These locations are Sunai Rupai, Orang, and Barnardi Wildlife Sanctuary. And released animals establish themselves successfully in the wild habitats. Meanwhile, a further 60 individuals are remaining in captivity as a safety net population in order to continue to produce new pygmy hawks for future releases. Between 2020 to 2022, 36 pygmy hawks were released in Manas National Park. With this, the number of pygmy hawks reintroduced into the wild by the conservation program has reached 152, 70 male and 82 females, which is more than their current original global wild population. So we can conclude that it is one of the most successful program involve captive breeding and release of captive bred animal in the wild. Let's now discuss about the reintroduction. Population restoration of threatened species involves 2 processes: augmentation, which covers reinforcement, restocking, and supplementation, and reintroduction. Let's understand what is the difference between the 2. Augmentation: intentional movement and release of an organism into an existing population of conspecific. For example, translocation of cheetah and tiger from high density areas to low density areas by the Madhya Pradesh Forest Department. In other words, it is the translocation of individual of a species to an area which already has population of the species, but population is small. This aims to enhance population viability, for instance, by increasing population size, by increasing genetic diversity, or by increasing the representation of specific demographic groups or stages. Now understand what is reintroduction. It is the process of intentional movement and release of an organism inside its indigenous range from which it has disappeared. For example, rhino reintroduction in Dudhwa Tiger Reserve, Gaur or Indian bison reintroduction in Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve. Reintroduction aimed to re-establish a viable population of focal species within its indigenous range. Let us discuss some important reintroduction programs from India. Gharial reintroduction. In Beas Conservation Reserve, the Gharial Reintroduction Conservation Program was initiated in 2017. It is aimed to re-establish breeding population of gharial in the river of Punjab and ensure their long-term survival. A total of 94 juvenile gharials reared at the Deori Gharial Rearing Center in Morena, Madhya Pradesh, has been reintroduced in 5 batches. In Hastinapur Wildlife Sanctuary, the reintroduction program was initiated in March 2019 as an initiative by WWF India and Uttar Pradesh Forest Department's Gharial Conservation Program. The Indian government is also implementing Gharial reintroduction in Mahanadi. In addition to this, gharials are also reintroduced in Ramanga River in Corvette Tiger Reserve. Indian one-horned rhinoceros reintroduction programs in India. Indian one-horned rhinoceros is on the IUCN endangered list and in Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act of India. A 1979 report of the Species Survival Commission of Asian Rhino Specialist Group emphasized the need for continuous effort in the protection and monitoring of the species, adding that steps must be envisaged to establish additional viable population units in suitable areas, preferably in the rhino's former distributional range. In 1979, Indian Board for Wildlife set up a committee under the chairmanship of the senior author to examine the conservation status of the rhino in India and, if appropriate, to make recommendation for the establishment of several new populations. The committee recommended a trial translocation of 6 animals into Dudhwa National Park in the Tarai zone of the northern Uttar Pradesh. Early in 1984, a group of about 10 rhinos living outside Povitora Sanctuary was selected by the Assam Forest Department for the capture operation. Some of the animals captured from this site are released in Dudhwa National Park. To establish a vigorous breeding nuclei of rhinos in Dudhwa, it was decided to reintroduce more stock from a different population. The collaboration of His Majesty's Government of Nepal was obtained in the exchange of 4 young adult female rhinos from around the area of Chitram National Park for 16 domesticated Indian elephant. Now Dudhwa has viable population of 46 rhinos in Dudhwa National Park. Tiger reintroduction. The first reintroduction of tigers in India was in 2008 at the Sariska Tiger Reserve in Rajasthan. The reintroduction was a joint effort by the Government of India, Government of Rajasthan, and the Wildlife Institute of India. The reintroduction of tiger in India is done to establish a free-ranging tiger population areas where they were once native but have since gone extinct. The goal is to help the tiger survive long term in the wild and perform their ecological and evolutionary role. In 2009, we also lost all the tigers from Panda Tiger Reserve in MP. In 2009, the reserve began reintroducing tiger with reintroduction of 3 individuals 2 female and 1 male. In 2011, 2 semi-wild tigers were relocated, and in 2014 and 15, a wild-caught female and a male were added. Panna Tiger Reserve has been successful in reintroducing tigers, and the population has grown up to over 60 individuals now. Gaur reintroduction in Bandhavgarh. The Gaur was historically found in BTR in small numbers. According to the management plan prepared by Dr. U. Prakasam, the last Gaur, a male, was sealed in Bandhavgarh in 1998. So, MP government in collaboration with Wildlife Institute of India planned the reintroduction of Gaur from Kana Tiger Reserve. 19 animals were successfully translocated to Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve from Kana Tiger Reserve, and now we have a viable population of more than 50 Gaurs in Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve. The reintroduction of Gaur to Bandhavgarh is an important conservation initiative for the species, as the species successfully established a viable population in Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve. The success of the reintroduction depends on the proper management of the population in the future. Cheetah reintroduction. More than 70 years after Indian native subspecies, the Asiatic cheetah became extinct. A small number of Southeast African cheetah have been flown in from Namibia and South Africa to a national park in India. On 17 September 2022, 5 female and 3 males of Southeast African cheetah between the age of 4 and 6 years were translocated from Namibia and released in a quarantine enclosure constructed in Kuno National Park in the state of Madhya Pradesh. Following an agreement with South Africa, a further 12 cheetah arrived in February 2023. In March 2023, 2 animals were released into the park and followed by the others. Later in the month, a cheetah gave birth to 4 cubs, the first recorded live cheetah birth in India in over 70 years. We have to wait to understand the success of this cheetah reintroduction program in India. Thank you.